They made him wait outside like a servant at his own grandfather's funeral. His wife said nothing. Her family laughed. But when the lawyer opened that briefcase, every single person in that room would learn the real meaning of karma. What secret had the old janitor been hiding for 41 years? Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the truth hidden in that will is about to change everything, and you don't want to miss a single second. Daniel Harper was 34 years old and earning $58,000 a year as a high school history teacher when his wife's family made him stand outside during his own grandfather's funeral reception. And what the reading of the will revealed 3 hours later would cost them everything they'd spent 20 years building. The November rain hammered against the windows of Lakeside Memorial Chapel on Oak Street in Portland. As Daniel stood in the hallway, his $89 Target suit soaked through. Inside the reception room, his wife Victoria's family, the Sterlings of Sterling Investment Group, worth an estimated $47 million, laughed and drank $300 bottles of Chateau Margaux while his grandfather lay in a casket 50 ft away. The help doesn't belong in here during family time. Victoria's mother, Margaret Sterling, had announced loudly when Daniel tried to enter, though I suppose he thinks he's family now. Daniel had heard worse from them over the past 8 years of marriage. But today, at his grandfather's funeral, something inside him finally cracked. Not enough to make a scene. He'd learned that the Sterlings fed on confrontation like sharks on blood, but enough to make him remember what his grandfather, William Harper, had whispered to him in the hospital 3 weeks ago when the pancreatic cancer had reduced him to 97 lbs of translucent skin and jutting bones. Let them think they've won, son. Just wait for the lawyers. Daniel had thought it was the morphine talking. His grandfather had been a janitor at Lincoln High School in the suburbs for 41 years, retiring with a pension of $31,000 annually. He'd lived in the same rent-controlled apartment on Riverside Drive since 1983, paying $847 a month for a 2-bedroom that would cost $3,200 on the open market. The most valuable thing Daniel thought his grandfather owned was a 2006 Honda Civic with 187,000 miles on it. He had no idea how wrong he was. Daniel, sweetie, maybe you should just wait in the car. Victoria appeared in the hallway, her $2,400 Burberry dress immaculate, her expression that particular blend of pity and embarrassment she'd perfected over the years. Daddy's telling the story about the time you tried to explain cryptocurrency to him at the country club and everyone's laughing so hard. It's my grandfather's funeral, Victoria. I know, baby. I know. But you know how my family is. Just give them an hour, okay? Then we'll go home and I'll make your favorite lasagna. And Mr. Harper. A man in an impeccable charcoal suit appeared at the end of the hallway, carrying a leather briefcase with the gold-embossed logo of Anderson & Associates, one of the most expensive law firms in Portland with partners billing at $100 and $200 per hour. I'm Gregory Anderson. Your grandfather retained our services. I know this is difficult timing, but we need to conduct the reading of the will today as specified in Mr. William Harper's final wishes. The conference room is ready. Victoria's face went pale. Will? What will? Daniel, your grandfather didn't have anything to. Apparently, he did. Daniel felt something strange rising in his chest. Not quite hope. He'd had that beaten out of him years ago by the Sterlings, but something close to it. Where's the conference room? 3rd floor. I've already notified the other interested parties. Other parties? Victoria's voice climbed an octave. What other parties? Your family, Mrs. Harper. Your grandfather insisted they be present. If you enjoy stories of shocking family secrets and sweet revenge against the wealthy elite with a sweet reconciliation at the ending, kindly like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new stories here every day, each one more intense than the last one. And tell me in the comment where you are watching from. The conference room on the 3rd floor of Lakeside Memorial Chapel was designed for exactly these occasions. Families gathering to divide estates, to discover secrets, to fight over money while a body cooled in the basement. The mahogany table could seat 20. Today it held 12. On one side, Margaret Sterling, 61, in her $8,700 Chanel suit. Her husband, Robert Sterling, 64, founder and CEO of Sterling Investment Group. Their son, Tyler Sterling, 36, hedge fund manager with a $340,000 annual salary plus bonuses. Their daughter, Amanda Sterling Cruz, 33, married to a plastic surgeon and living off a $2.1 million trust fund. And Victoria on the other side, Daniel alone. "This is absurd," Margaret declared, her 3-carat diamond ring from Tiffany & Co. retail price $127,000, catching the light as she gestured dismissively. "Gregory, I don't know what that old janitor told you, but there's clearly been some mistake. The Harpers don't have estates. They have garage sales." Tyler snorted into his whiskey. Pappy Van Winkle, 23-year, $3,500 a bottle, which he'd brought from the reception. "This is priceless, Dad. Can you imagine? Maybe he's leaving Daniel his mop collection. Finally, something he's qualified to inherit." "Tyler," Victoria said weakly. But she didn't look at Daniel. She never looked at Daniel when her family attacked him. Gregory Anderson remained completely professional, unmoved by the Sterlings' sneering. He'd been a lawyer for 23 years, had handled estates worth hundreds of millions. He'd seen every variety of human greed and cruelty, but there was something in his eyes, just a flicker, that made Daniel think the man knew exactly what was coming and was enjoying the anticipation. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here for the reading of the last will and testament of William Thomas Harper, deceased November 15, 2024 at St. Mary's Hospital. Mr. Harper worked with our firm for the past 18 years to structure his estate and ensure his final wishes were executed precisely. 18 years? Robert Sterling frowned. "That's impossible. Your firm charges what? $500 an hour minimum. Our standard rate is $200 per hour, Mr. Sterling." Mr. Harper paid in full in advance for all services rendered. Total fees came to approximately $67,000 over the 18-year period. The Sterlings exchanged glances. Daniel felt dizzy. $67,000 in legal fees. His grandfather, who clipped coupons from the Sunday newspaper, who bought day-old bread from the bakery on Morrison Street, who had never in Daniel's entire life taken a vacation that wasn't camping in the Cascades. "This is a scam," Margaret announced. "I'm calling our attorney. You're welcome to do so, Mrs. Sterling. However, I should mention that you are specifically named in the will, which is why your presence was requested. Leaving now would mean forfeiting your opportunity to hear what Mr. Harper had to say to you." That stopped her. The Sterlings didn't forfeit anything. Gregory Anderson opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick document bound in navy leather. "I'll begin with the preliminary statements. I, William Thomas Harper, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all previous wills and codicils. I have prepared this document with full knowledge of its contents and implications, having been advised by legal counsel at Anderson and Associates for the past 18 years. Daniel's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against the mahogany table. "First, I wish to address the financial inventory of my estate. At the time of this document's preparation, my total assets are valued at approximately $74.3 million. The room exploded. Margaret Sterling's champagne glass, baccarat crystal, $85 per glass, shattered on the marble floor. Robert choked on his whiskey. Tyler's face went from smirking confidence to pale shock in under 3 seconds. Amanda grabbed her husband's arm, her perfectly manicured nails, weekly appointments at Serenity Spa, $150 per session, digging into his Armani suit jacket. Victoria just stared at Daniel, her mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air. "That's impossible," Robert managed. $74 million from a janitor's salary. This is fraud. This is Mr. Sterling. I assure you every dollar is accounted for and legal." Mr. Harper was quite thorough in his documentation. "Would you like me to continue?" "Yes," Daniel heard himself say. His voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. Please continue. Gregory Anderson allowed himself the smallest smile. The source of my wealth requires explanation, as it will surprise those who knew me only as a custodial worker. In 1983, I inherited $127,000 from my uncle Edward Harper, who had no children of his own. Rather than spend this money, I invested it carefully and conservatively. I purchased a small apartment building in the Pearl District for $78,000, a neighborhood that was considered undesirable at the time. I lived frugally, continued working my job, and reinvested all rental income. Daniel remembered that building. His grandfather had sold it in 2005, and Daniel had thought it was because he needed money for medical bills his grandmother had accumulated before she died. Over the next 41 years, I bought and sold 17 properties in Portland, Beaverton, and Gresham, always ahead of gentrification patterns. I purchased stock in Apple Computer in 1985 for $3 per share and held it through every split. I bought Amazon at $18 per share in 1997. I invested in Google's IPO in 2004. I purchased Bitcoin in 2011 when it traded at $7 per coin. I now hold 847 Bitcoin, currently valued at approximately $31.2 million at today's market price of $36,850 per coin. Tyler Sterling looked like he was going to vomit. He'd spent the last 5 Christmases explaining to Daniel very slowly, as if to a child, how cryptocurrency was a scam that only idiots fell for. I lived as a janitor because I enjoyed the work. I liked the students at Lincoln High. I liked having a purpose and a routine. I did not live frugally because I was poor. I lived frugally because I am not a fool. Every dollar I didn't spend on useless luxuries was a dollar that could grow, compound, and eventually provide security for my only grandson, Daniel Thomas Harper. Daniel felt wetness on his cheeks and realized he was crying. His grandfather, his quiet, humble grandfather who had packed his lunch in a brown paper bag every day, who had taught Daniel that true wealth wasn't about impressing others, but about having choices, had been worth more than the entire Sterling family combined. Now, to the distribution of my estate, Gregory Anderson continued, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. To my beloved grandson, Daniel Thomas Harper, I leave the entirety of my financial assets, all properties, stocks, bonds, cryptocurrency holdings, and cash accounts totaling $74.3 million. This includes the following specific assets. The lawyer began reading a list that seemed to go on forever. 3 apartment buildings in Portland currently generating $42,000 in monthly rental income. A mixed-use property in Beaverton worth $3.7 million. Stock portfolios with Fidelity $12.4 million. Vanguard $8.9 million. And Charles Schwab $6.2 million. Checking and savings accounts at Wells Fargo totaling $1.8 million. The Bitcoin wallet worth $31.2 million. Daniel couldn't process it. The numbers were too big, too impossible. This morning, he'd been a high school teacher who drove a 2012 Toyota Camry with a cracked windshield. Now he was worth more than most people would earn in 1,000 lifetimes. This is Tyler slammed his hand on the table. He's contesting this. We're contesting this. That old man was clearly senile and Daniel obviously manipulated. Mr. Sterling, Gregory Anderson's voice cut through the room like a knife. I would advise you to remain silent until I finished reading because the next section specifically addresses you and your family. The Sterlings fell silent, but their faces were twisted with rage and disbelief. However, Gregory continued, Before Daniel can claim his inheritance, there is one condition he must fulfill and several specific bequests I wish to make to the Sterling family. Victoria grabbed Daniel's hand across the table. See, there's a condition. You might not get it. We need to talk to our lawyer. We need to... Daniel pulled his hand away. For the first time in 8 years, he pulled his hand away from his wife. To Margaret Sterling, who once told my grandson at a family dinner that he would never amount to anything because ambition isn't genetic and certainly isn't contagious. I leave the sum of $1 in this message. You are correct that ambition isn't genetic. If it were, your children might have earned something rather than simply inheriting it. I hope this single dollar brings you more joy than your millions have, though I doubt it will. You are a small, bitter woman who measures worth in designer labels because you have no internal value to offer the world. Margaret's face went purple. Robert grabbed her arm, but she was shaking with fury, unable to speak. To Robert Sterling, who told Daniel at his and Victoria's wedding reception that teachers are just failed businessmen who couldn't hack it in the real world, I leave $1 and this message. I made my fortune through patience, wisdom, and careful planning. You made yours through your father's connections and by exploiting legal loopholes in the tax code. Loopholes I documented extensively and provided to the IRS in a sealed envelope to be opened upon my death. Robert's face went from red to white. He's bluffing. That's slander. I'll sue. The evidence includes copies of documents from the Cayman Islands accounts, records of the shell corporations in Delaware, and testimony from employees at Sterling Investment Group, who were paid by me over the past 12 years to document your illegal activities. The IRS estimates you owe approximately $18.7 million in back taxes and penalties. The room went silent, except for Robert's ragged breathing. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel if you have not, because the ending of this story will blow your mind. And drop a comment below telling me what you think Daniel should do next. Gregory Anderson turned a page. To Tyler Sterling, who told Daniel at Thanksgiving 2022 that he was dragging down the family's collective net worth by existing, I leave $1. I also leave you the knowledge that I purchased short positions against every major investment your hedge fund made in the past 3 years. When news of your father's IRS investigation becomes public, your investors will flee, your fund will collapse, and those short positions which I've left to Daniel will be worth approximately $4.3 million. Tyler looked like he might actually faint. To Amanda Sterling Cruz, who laughed when Victoria told her that Daniel had asked for a raise at work because they were struggling to pay bills. I leave $1 and the information that your husband has been having an affair with his surgical nurse for the past 14 months. Her name is Jessica Williams. She's 26 years old, and he's been paying for her apartment in Vancouver. $3,400 per month using money from the joint account you believe is for business expenses. I hired a private investigator 6 months ago when Daniel mentioned you'd been particularly cruel to Victoria lately. I thought you might be dealing with problems at home. I was correct. Amanda's perfectly composed face crumpled. She turned to her husband, who wouldn't meet her eyes. And finally to my granddaughter-in-law, Victoria Harper, who I once hoped would be a true partner to my grandson. Gregory Anderson's voice softened slightly. I leave you nothing directly because you already have access to everything Daniel does, but I leave you with a choice and a truth. Victoria was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks, her hands trembling. The choice is this. You can remain married to Daniel and share in his inheritance, living a life of financial security you could never have imagined. Or you can choose your family, the family that has spent 8 years teaching you to be ashamed of the good, kind, hard-working man you married. But you cannot have both. The truth is this. I have been documenting every family gathering, every holiday, every wedding and birthday party for the past 8 years. Daniel thought I was simply taking photos and videos like any proud grandfather, but I was also recording audio on a device in my shirt pocket. I have 127 hours of your family mocking, belittling, and emotionally abusing my grandson while you stood by and said nothing. While you laughed along, while you chose them over him again and again and again, Victoria's sobs were the only sound in the room. Daniel's condition for receiving his inheritance is simple. He must listen to these recordings, all of them, and then decide whether he wishes to remain married to you. The recordings are stored with Gregory Anderson and will be provided to Daniel in their entirety. After he has listened to them, he has 6 months to make his decision. If he chooses to divorce you, you will receive nothing from his inheritance. I have structured a prenuptial trust that supersedes your marital assets, legally reviewed and approved by 3 separate law firms. If he chooses to remain married to you, you will share in his wealth. But know this, Victoria. He will have heard every laugh, every cruel joke, every moment you chose your family's approval over your husband's dignity, and he will make his choice with full knowledge of who you truly are. However, Gregory Anderson's voice darkened considerably. There is one additional matter that requires immediate attention. In the course of my investigations into the Sterling family's financial improprieties, I uncovered something far more disturbing than tax evasion. The room went deathly silent. Margaret's breathing became shallow. Robert's knuckles went white as he gripped the armrest. "What are you talking about?" Victoria whispered, her face draining of all color. In April of 2023, Gregory continued, reading directly from the will, I became aware through my private investigator that the Sterling family had begun discussing what they referred to as the Daniel problem. "This is outrageous." Robert jumped to his feet. "You can't possibly—" "Sit down, Mr. Sterling, or I will have security remove you from this reading. Your opportunity to contest these findings will come later. Right now, you will listen." Robert sat, but his jaw was clenched so tight Daniel could see the muscles jumping. The discussions, Gregory continued, were recorded during several family dinners at the Sterling estate. The private investigator I employed, a former FBI agent named Thomas Reynolds, had placed recording devices in the dining room with the assistance of a housekeeper who had been mistreated by the family. On April 23, 2023, Margaret Sterling suggested that Daniel's continued presence in the family was an embarrassment that needed to be permanently resolved. On May 7, 2023, Tyler Sterling researched methods to stage an accident involving carbon monoxide poisoning, as evidenced by his browser history, which Mr. Reynolds obtained through legal channels. Daniel felt ice water flooding through his veins. They had planned to kill him. His wife's family had actually discussed murdering him. On May 19, 2023, Robert Sterling transferred $50,000 to an offshore account designated for family problem resolution, a transaction that was documented and traced to a known criminal facilitator in Seattle named Marcus Webb. "Amanda," Gregory said, looking directly at her, "your text message to your mother on June 3, 2023, read, 'Is the Daniel situation handled yet? V is getting suspicious about all the family meetings.'" The room was spinning. Daniel grabbed the edge of the table to steady himself, and Victoria, Gregory's voice was gentle now, almost sympathetic. "On June 8, 2023, your mother told you explicitly that they were planning to remove Daniel from the picture permanently. Your response, documented in a recorded phone call, was, 'I don't want to know the details. Just make sure it doesn't trace back to me.'" Victoria's sobbing intensified. No, I didn't mean. I thought they were talking about convincing you to leave, about paying you off. I didn't think." "You didn't ask," Gregory interrupted. "When your mother used the words, 'remove permanently,' you didn't ask for clarification. You simply said you didn't want to know the details." "The plan," Gregory continued, "was interrupted by 2 factors. First, Mr. Harper's health declined rapidly, and the family decided to wait until after his death, believing there would be no estate to complicate matters. Second, Mr. Harper informed me of the situation, and I immediately contacted the FBI. Special Agent Sarah Randy of the FBI's Portland field office has been building a case against the Sterling family for conspiracy to commit murder for the past 18 months. Gregory withdrew another folder from his briefcase. These documents, along with the recordings, text messages, financial records, and testimony from Marcus Webb, who agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence on unrelated charges, will be turned over to the FBI immediately following this reading. Mr. Sterling, Mrs. Sterling, Tyler, Amanda, and yes, Victoria, you are all facing federal charges of conspiracy to commit murder. The penalties for such charges range from 10 years to life in federal prison. Daniel couldn't breathe, couldn't think. His wife had known they wanted to kill him and had said she didn't want to know the details, not know. Not stop, not I'll divorce him myself, just I don't want to know the details. Daniel, Victoria reached for him across the table. Please, you have to understand. I never thought they'd actually do it. I thought it was just talk, just my mother being dramatic. You have to believe me. Gregory Anderson carefully placed the documents back in his briefcase. Mr. Harper wanted you to know, Daniel, that you were never paranoid. Every instinct that told you something was wrong, that you weren't safe, that they hated you beyond normal in-law tension, all of it was correct. He spent the last 2 years of his life not just building your financial future, but protecting your physical life. The FBI will be waiting outside to take statements from everyone present. Mr. Harper's final wish was that you be free, Daniel. Free from financial dependence, free from emotional abuse, and free from people who valued their pride more than your life. This reading is concluded. Gregory Anderson closed his briefcase with a decisive click. As if on cue, the conference room doors opened. 4 FBI agents in dark suits entered, badges visible on their belts. Special Agent Sarah Randy, a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and an air of absolute authority, stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Special Agent Randy with the FBI. Robert Sterling, Margaret Sterling, Tyler Sterling, Amanda Sterling Cruz, and Victoria Harper, you are all persons of interest in an ongoing federal investigation into conspiracy to commit murder. We need you to come with us for questioning. You can't do this, Margaret shrieked. We haven't done anything. Mrs. Sterling, I suggest you remain calm. We have recorded conversations, financial transactions, and testimony from multiple witnesses, including the individual your husband paid $50,000 to facilitate the murder of Daniel Harper. You will have the opportunity to explain your side of the story at our field office. I want my lawyer, Robert shouted. You are absolutely entitled to have an attorney present during questioning. We can wait for your legal representation to arrive. The Sterlings were ushered out one by one, each in a different stage of denial or panic. Margaret was still protesting her innocence. Robert was on his phone, frantically calling his attorney. Tyler looked like he might vomit. Amanda was crying silently. Victoria was the last to leave. She turned at the door, her eyes meeting Daniel's one final time. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Daniel said nothing. There was nothing left to say. After they were gone, Daniel sat alone in the conference room with Gregory Anderson. The lawyer poured 2 glasses of water from a pitcher on the side table and handed one to Daniel. I know this is overwhelming. Overwhelming doesn't begin to cover it. My wife. They were going to kill me. And she knew. Not the full extent, perhaps, but she knew something was being planned, and she chose not to stop it. That's worse, isn't it? Daniel's voice was hollow. If she'd been in on it from the start, that would be one kind of evil. But this is choosing comfort over my life. Choosing not to know because knowing would require her to act. Gregory Anderson sat down across from him. Your grandfather understood something profound about human nature. People can commit terrible acts, not through active malice, but through passive complicity. Victoria didn't want you dead necessarily. She just didn't want to deal with the consequences of protecting you. That's a different kind of cruelty, but it's cruelty nonetheless. What happens now? To them? The FBI will build their case. With the evidence your grandfather compiled, it's quite strong. Robert and Margaret will likely face the most serious charges, as they initiated and funded the conspiracy. Tyler and Amanda were complicit. Victoria. Her case is more complex. A good attorney might argue she didn't take the threat seriously, that she thought it was hyperbole. But the fact remains that she was warned and did nothing. And to me, you're free, Mr. Harper. Free to live your life without fear, without shame, without people who view you as a problem to be solved. Your grandfather gave you that gift. Take it. Daniel stood on shaky legs. I need to go home. Which home? The apartment you shared with Victoria or somewhere new? Somewhere new? I can't go back there. Not now. Not ever. Gregory Anderson pulled out his phone. I know a real estate agent. She's discreet, efficient, and she owes me a favor. I can have her show you properties this week. Do it. I want to be moved out before Victoria makes bail. If she makes bail. Daniel left Lakeside Memorial Chapel through a side exit, avoiding the small crowd of journalists who had somehow already gotten wind of the FBI presence. The November rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflective under the streetlights. His phone was ringing. Unknown number after unknown number. He turned it off. The apartment Daniel had shared with Victoria in the Northwest District, a 900 SQFT one-bedroom that cost them $3,200 a month, eating up half his post-tax salary, felt like a crime scene when he returned that evening. Every corner held a memory that had been recontextualized by the day's revelations. The couch where Victoria had cuddled with him while planning his murder. The kitchen where she'd made him breakfast while her family researched carbon monoxide poisoning. The bedroom where she'd told him she loved him while knowing he might not live to see another year. He couldn't stay here, not even for one more night. Daniel threw his essentials into a suitcase. Clothes, toiletries, his laptop, the framed photo of his grandfather from his college graduation. Everything else could rot for all he cared. He called Gregory Anderson. Is there a hotel you'd recommend? Somewhere quiet. The Sentinel Hotel downtown. I'll call ahead. They'll have a suite ready for you. Don't worry about the cost, Mr. Harper. You're a wealthy man now, even if it doesn't feel real yet. It doesn't feel real. None of this feels real. Give it time. Grief, betrayal, and sudden wealth are each enough to unhinge a person. You're dealing with all three simultaneously. Be gentle with yourself. The Sentinel Hotel was everything the apartment wasn't. Clean, anonymous, free of memories. The suite was larger than his entire apartment, with a view of the Willamette River that sparkled in the night. Daniel sat on the edge of the enormous bed and finally let himself fall apart. He cried for his grandfather, who had spent his final years not just building a fortune, but orchestrating an elaborate protection plan because he knew his grandson was in danger. He cried for the 8 years he'd spent trying to be good enough for people who were planning his death. He cried for the marriage that had never been real, for the wife who had valued her comfort over his life. And when the tears finally stopped, he felt something else. Rage. Pure, clean, clarifying rage. They had wanted to kill him. Because he wasn't rich enough, because he embarrassed them at parties, because he taught high school instead of managing hedge funds, because he existed. His phone, which he'd turned back on, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Harper, this is Special Agent Randy. I know today was traumatic. When you're ready, I'd like to take your full statement. We're building an airtight case. They won't hurt anyone ever again. Daniel texted back, tomorrow, 9 a.m. Where? FBI Field Office, 1500 Bancroft Street. I'll be there. Another text came through, this time from Gregory Anderson. The real estate agent, Patricia Holmes, will meet you at 10 a.m. tomorrow. I've briefed her on your situation. She's found several properties that might suit your needs. All in neighborhoods far from anywhere the Sterlings frequent. Thank you for everything my grandfather asked you to do, and for doing it so well. It was an honor to work with William Harper. He was one of the finest men I've ever known. He certainly thought the world of you. Never doubted you for a moment, even when you doubted yourself. Daniel set his phone aside and opened his laptop. He pulled up the encrypted email Gregory Anderson had sent him, the one with login credentials to the server containing the 127 audio files of his humiliation. He'd been supposed to listen to them before making a decision about his marriage. That decision had been made for him in the most horrific way possible, but he needed to listen anyway, needed to understand exactly how blind he'd been. He started with the oldest file from December 24, 2017, 6 months after their wedding. His grandfather's voice came through first, slightly muffled. "Daniel, hand me your coat. I'll hang it up." Then laughter from the main room, Margaret's voice, loud and clear. "I give it 2 years, 3 at most. She's already embarrassed to introduce him to our friends." Robert's response: "He's a nice enough kid. Not bright, but nice." Nice doesn't pay for private schools or beach houses in the Hamptons. Margaret said she'll wake up eventually. Then Victoria's voice, the sound that had whispered, "I love you" to Daniel that morning. "Mom, stop. He might hear you." "Oh, please. He knows what he is. Why do you think he grabbed onto you so fast? You're his ticket to a better life." "That's not 'we love each other.' Love." Margaret's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Darling, you love Chanel and Summers in Tuscany. You tolerate him." Victoria's response was barely audible. "It's not like that. Then prove me wrong. Bring him to the club tomorrow. Introduce him to the Vanderbilts and the Rockwells. Watch him try to talk about his students while they discuss their yacht clubs and art collections. If you're not mortified within an hour, I'll drop it." A pause. Then Victoria: "Fine, but you have to promise to be nice." "I'm always nice, darling." Daniel stopped the recording. His hands were shaking. He remembered that day, December 25, 2017, going to the Columbia River Country Club. Victoria had been tense all morning, snapping at him about his tie from Men's Warehouse, $47,999, his shoes, Clark's, $89, his conversation topics. At the time, he'd thought she was stressed about seeing her parents. Now he understood she'd been preparing to be embarrassed, and she had been. He'd seen it in her eyes every time he spoke about his job, his students, the school's budget problems. She'd steered him away from conversations, made excuses to leave early, been silent the entire drive home. That night she'd cried and told him she loved him. He'd held her and believed her. He pressed play on the next file. Over the next 6 hours, Daniel listened to Christmas dinners and birthday parties, engagement celebrations, and casual Sunday brunches. He heard his father-in-law explain to a business associate that Victoria married a teacher of all things. "We're hoping it's a phase." He heard Tyler tell a group of friends that my sister's husband is basically a professional babysitter with a degree. He heard Amanda describe him as sweet, but dim to her husband's colleagues. And through it all, he heard Victoria, not defending him, not arguing, not leaving, just agreeing softly, reluctantly sometimes, but always ultimately agreeing. "I know he's not what you wanted for me, Mom. He does try his best, even if his best isn't very impressive. Sometimes I wonder what life would have been like if I'd married someone like Dylan Rockwell. He started his own investment firm last year. I love Daniel, but I'm not blind to his limitations." The worst came from Thanksgiving 2022, file number 76. Daniel had asked his principal for a raise that week, $3,500 more per year, bringing his salary to $61,500. The principal had approved it. Daniel had been excited to tell Victoria, proud that his work was being recognized. He heard himself in the recording telling the family at dinner. Then silence, then Tyler's laugh. $61,000. $61,000. I spend that on my car insurance and wine budget combined. More laughter, then Margaret. "Well, at least the bar for exciting news is very low in your household, dear." And Victoria, his wife, the woman he'd held that morning and called the love of his life. "I know it's not much, but it's a big deal for Daniel. Let him have this. Not he works hard and deserves it. Not be respectful of my husband. Just let him have this like he was a child being humored with a participation trophy." Daniel stopped the recording at 2:47 a.m., having made it through 89 of the 127 files. He felt hollowed out, scraped raw. Every memory of the past 8 years was recontextualizing itself in his mind. Every time Victoria had asked him not to talk about work at parties, every time she'd suggested he might be happier with his teacher friends instead of joining her family events, every time she'd told him to let her handle conversations with her parents about money, she hadn't been protecting him from their cruelty. She'd been protecting them from his embarrassment. But now, knowing what he knew about the murder plot, every memory took on an even darker shade. Had she been keeping him docile, unsuspecting, easy to eliminate when the time came? Had her affection been a tool to keep him compliant? His phone buzzed with a call from a blocked number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Harper," Gregory Anderson's voice. "I apologize for calling so late. I wanted to check in. Many people find the recordings difficult to process. You knew what was in them. I helped your grandfather organize them. Yes, he listened to each one multiple times. Why didn't he tell me? All these years he knew what they said about me, how Victoria let them say it, what they were planning. And he wanted to many times, but he was a wise man, Mr. Harper. He knew that if he told you, you might not believe it. You might think he was trying to sabotage your marriage out of jealousy or class resentment. But evidence you can't argue with, especially when that evidence might save your life." Daniel laughed, a bitter sound. He was thorough. He loved you very much, and he understood something important. Financial security gives you the freedom to make choices based on what's right, not what's necessary. Right now, you needed Victoria financially. You couldn't afford to divorce her, couldn't afford to cut ties with her family. You'd lose the apartment, struggle to pay legal fees, possibly damage your career if she turned vindictive. But with your inheritance, you're free. Free to choose who you want in your life based on how they treat you, not based on economics. Free to be alive, because you can afford protection, security, independence. She tried to have me killed. Not directly, perhaps. But she knew something was being planned and chose ignorance over action. That's its own form of guilt. What do I do now? That's entirely up to you, Mr. Harper. The FBI will handle the criminal case. You should focus on building the life your grandfather wanted for you. A life of purpose, dignity, and safety. Daniel looked around the hotel suite at the temporary shelter it provided. This had been his life. Small, contained, manageable, under constant threat. What do I do with all this money? With this freedom? Whatever brings you peace, whatever honors your grandfather's memory. Whatever makes you feel like you're living, not just surviving. After Anderson hung up, Daniel pulled up real estate listings on his laptop. He filtered for Portland homes in his new price range, which was essentially unlimited. Penthouses in the Pearl District, $12.4 million. Luxury condos in the South Waterfront, $8.9 million. Historic mansions in the West Hills, $15.7 million. He could buy any of them in cash. The thought was dizzying. Instead, he searched for something simpler, a 3-bedroom house in Laurelhurst, near his grandfather's old neighborhood. Craftsman-style, original hardwood floors, a view of Mount Hood. Listed at $2.3 million. He could buy it tomorrow without even denting his inheritance. His phone buzzed again. Victoria from her mother's phone, presumably her own having been confiscated by the FBI. "Please, Daniel, we need to talk. I love you. I know I've made mistakes, but I love you." He stared at the message for a long time. Did she love him? Had she ever? Or had she loved the idea of a safe, controllable husband who would never threaten her family's dominance in their marriage? A husband who could be eliminated if he became too inconvenient? He opened file number 127, the most recent recording. His grandfather's retirement party at Lincoln High, 6 months before his cancer diagnosis. Victoria had come reluctantly, complained about parking, spent most of the evening on her phone. He heard himself introducing Victoria to Mrs. Patterson, a colleague. "This is my wife, Victoria. Victoria, Mrs. Patterson teaches chemistry." "Lovely to meet you," Victoria said. Then to someone else, Tyler, visiting from the city for dinner afterward. "Can we leave soon?" This is depressing. All these people celebrating someone's retirement after 40 years of making minimum wage. It's not minimum wage, Tyler's voice amused. It's slightly above minimum wage. Very slightly. I don't know how Daniel does it every day surrounded by this mediocrity. Don't tell him I said that. Your secret's safe with me. Though honestly, isn't he kind of the definition of Tyler? Stop. What? It's not mean if it's true. He's a nice guy, Victoria, but let's be honest, he's not going to change the world teaching teenagers about the Civil War. He's not going to make money. He's not going anywhere. You could have married Dylan Rockwell and been living in a penthouse with a Porsche Cayenne. Instead, you're in a one-bedroom walk-up with a guy who thinks Olive Garden is fine dining. A long pause. Then, Victoria, I know just that. I know. Not he's a good man, not I don't care about money, not I love him. Just, I know. Daniel closed his laptop. Something in his chest, something that had been cracking slowly over the past 8 hours, finally broke completely. Not with anger, not with tears, just with a quiet, certain clarity. He picked up his phone and texted Gregory Anderson. I need you to do 3 things for me, Daniel wrote. First, start the paperwork for a divorce. I want the prenuptial trust activated immediately. Victoria gets nothing from my inheritance. Understood. Second, I want to buy a house. Send me the real estate agent's contact information. Budget is $3 million or under. I want to be moved in by the end of the month. Done. And third, I want to cooperate fully with the FBI investigation. Whatever they need from me, statements, testimony, anything. I want to make sure the Sterlings never hurt anyone again. There was a smile in Gregory's response. Your grandfather would be proud, Mr. Harper. He always said you were kinder than the Sterlings deserved, but never stupid. I'm done being kind to people who think kindness is weakness. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in Daniel's situation. The FBI field office on Bancroft Street was a stark, imposing building that matched Daniel's mood perfectly when he arrived at 8:45 a.m. the next morning. Special Agent Sarah Randy met him in the lobby, her handshake firm and professional. Mr. Harper, thank you for coming in. I know this hasn't been easy. They tried to kill me. My wife knew. Easy doesn't really factor into it anymore. Fair point. Let's get your statement recorded, and then we can discuss what comes next. The interview room was exactly what Daniel expected from years of watching crime dramas: gray walls, a metal table, uncomfortable chairs, and a camera recording everything. Agent Randy sat across from him with a legal pad and a digital recorder. Start from the beginning, she said. When did you first suspect something was wrong with the Sterling family's treatment of you? From the moment I met them? But I thought it was just typical in-law stuff. Snobbery, class prejudice. I never imagined that they'd escalate to planning your murder. Most people wouldn't. That's what makes cases like this so insidious. The abuse builds gradually, normalizing extreme behavior until something that should be shocking becomes almost logical to the perpetrators. Daniel spent the next 3 hours recounting 8 years of systematic emotional abuse, humiliation, and isolation. He described holidays where he was excluded from family photos, dinners where his achievements were mocked, and countless moments where Victoria had chosen her family's approval over his dignity. Then came the harder part, the months leading up to the murder plot. In early 2023, did you notice any change in the Sterling family's behavior toward you? Daniel thought back. They were less openly hostile, actually. More polite, like they'd decided to tolerate me. I thought maybe we'd turned a corner. That's consistent with what we've seen in the evidence. Once they decided on a course of action, they stopped the overt abuse. Didn't want to create obvious motive. Didn't want you to become suspicious enough to distance yourself. They were setting you up, making sure you'd stay close, stay vulnerable. There was something else. Daniel remembered suddenly. In May of 2023, Victoria insisted we update our life insurance policies. She said it was responsible planning, that we needed to protect each other. I increased my policy to $500,000 with her as the beneficiary. Agent Randy's pen stopped moving. She looked up, her expression hardening. Did Victoria initiate this conversation? Yes, she brought it up right after a family dinner at her parents' house. Said her father had suggested it. We need to get those policy documents. That's evidence of financial motive. If you'd died, Victoria would have received $500,000, and your inheritance from your grandfather would have died with you, keeping her family's secrets safe. The realization hit Daniel like a physical blow. They were going to get money out of it, too. It wasn't just about eliminating an embarrassment. It was about profit. Most murders have multiple motives, Agent Randy said gently. Pride, money, power. The Sterlings had all three reasons to want you gone. But understanding their motives doesn't make it hurt less, does it? No, it doesn't. They continued for another hour, with Daniel providing every detail he could remember about the family dynamics, Victoria's behavior during the relevant time period, and any conversations that, in hindsight, seemed suspicious. Finally, Agent Randy closed her legal pad. You've been incredibly helpful, Mr. Harper. This statement, combined with the evidence your grandfather compiled, gives us a very strong case. What happens now? We've already arrested Marcus Webb. The facilitator, Robert Sterling, paid. He's cooperating in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's provided details about the plan. They were going to stage a carbon monoxide leak in your apartment while Victoria was conveniently away visiting family. It would have looked like a tragic accident. Your landlord would have been questioned, possibly faced negligence charges, while the Sterlings walked away clean. Daniel felt sick. When? When were they planning to do this? Originally, late summer of 2023. But when your grandfather's health declined, they decided to wait. They thought there might be a small inheritance that would complicate matters if you died first. If they'd only known. If they'd only known they were waiting to murder someone who was about to inherit $74 million. Yes. Though honestly, your grandfather's illness might have saved your life. The delay gave him time to finalize his arrangements, to ensure you'd be protected. What about Victoria? What charges does she face? That's more complex. Her attorney will likely argue that she didn't take the threat seriously, that she thought her family was engaging in hyperbole. The text message about not wanting to know details could be interpreted as distancing herself from the plan. But, Agent Randy continued, we have evidence that she increased your life insurance, that she made sure you'd be home on the dates they were discussing, that she created alibis for herself. A good prosecutor can argue that she was a willing participant who simply didn't want explicit knowledge to protect herself legally. Will she go to prison? That depends on many factors: the strength of her defense, the jury's interpretation of her actions, whether she cooperates with our investigation. But yes, she's facing serious charges. Conspiracy to commit murder, even with a questionable level of direct involvement, typically carries 10 to 20 years. Good. The word came out harder than Daniel intended. I know that sounds vindictive. It sounds like someone who realizes their life was in danger and the person who vowed to protect them chose not to. That's not vindictive, Mr. Harper. That's rational. Daniel left the FBI field office at noon, feeling drained but somehow lighter. The truth was out. The evidence was compiled. The people who had wanted him dead would face consequences. His phone buzzed with a message from Patricia Holmes, the real estate agent. Mr. Harper, I have 4 properties to show you this afternoon. All excellent neighborhoods, all move-in ready. Can you meet me at 2 p.m.? He texted back, I'll be there. The first house Patricia showed him was a modern glass and steel structure in the West Hills. Stunning views, infinity pool, $4.2 million. It's very impressive, Patricia said, gesturing to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The kind of home that makes a statement. I don't want to make a statement, Daniel said quietly. I want to make a home. Patricia smiled. I had a feeling you'd say that. Let me show you something different. The third house was the Craftsman in Laurelhurst he'd seen online. Built in 1912, lovingly restored, with original hardwood floors, a working fireplace, and a backyard garden that someone had clearly tended with care. The moment Daniel walked through the front door, he knew. This is it. You haven't seen the whole house yet. I don't need to. This is home. They made an offer that afternoon. $2.3 million cash, no contingencies. The sellers, an elderly couple moving to Arizona to be near their daughter, accepted within 2 hours. You can close in 3 weeks, Patricia told him. But if you need to move in sooner, I'm sure we can arrange something. 3 weeks is perfect. It'll take me that long to furnish it. Do you have an interior designer you work with? I know several excellent. But if I may suggest, Mr. Harper, furnish it yourself. Take your time. Choose pieces that mean something to you, not pieces that impress others. You've spent 8 years living in someone else's version of your life. This is your chance to create your own. She was right. Over the next 3 weeks, Daniel did something he'd never done before. He made choices based solely on what he wanted. He bought a comfortable couch from a local furniture maker, $2,400, because he liked the craftsmanship, not the brand name. He found an antique desk at an estate sale, $800, because it reminded him of his grandfather's workspace. He filled the bookshelves with books he'd always wanted to read, but Victoria had dismissed as not impressive enough for guests to see. He set up the second bedroom as an office, the third as a guest room. And he left space on the walls for art he hadn't found yet, for memories he hadn't made yet, for a life he was only beginning to imagine. The news about the Sterling family's arrest had spread through Portland society like wildfire. The Oregonian ran a front-page story. Prominent investment family accused of murder plot. Local news channels covered it nightly. Social media exploded with speculation and outrage. Daniel's phone rang constantly with reporters requesting interviews. He declined them all. The only person from his old life he spoke to was Principal Anderson from Lincoln High. Daniel, I heard about everything. I'm so sorry. How are you holding up? I'm alive. That's more than the Sterlings wanted. Are you coming back to teach? The semester starts in 2 weeks. I want to. But I need to know if the school can handle the media attention, if my presence is going to be disruptive. Are you kidding? Principal Anderson's laugh was warm. You're a teacher who inherited millions and wants to keep teaching. You're about to become the most inspiring person our students have ever met. Come back whenever you're ready. We'll deal with the media together. Daniel returned to Lincoln High on the first day of the fall semester. He half expected whispers, stares, awkward questions. Instead, he got something different. His students treated him exactly the same as always. Well, Mr. Harper, one girl said during homeroom, we heard you're rich now. Does that mean you'll start giving easier grades? Nice try, Maria. But no. If anything, I have higher expectations now. I can afford to buy you better textbooks. A boy in the back raised his hand. Is it true your wife's family tried to kill you? That's complicated. But yes, essentially. That's messed up. Yes, Marcus, it really is. Another hand. Are you okay, though? Like, mentally? Because my mom says when bad stuff happens, you need therapy. Your mom is very wise. And yes, I'm talking to someone. It helps. The class nodded, satisfied. Then they opened their textbooks and started learning about the American Revolution, and Daniel felt more normal than he had in months. But normalcy wasn't all Daniel was after. That afternoon, he met with Gregory Anderson to discuss the next phase of his grandfather's legacy. I want to establish a foundation, Daniel said. The William Harper Foundation for Educational Excellence. Initial endowment, $25 million. Gregory smiled. Your grandfather predicted you'd do something like this. He'd be proud. The foundation will provide full scholarships to students from low-income families who want to pursue teaching careers. Full tuition, room and board, living expenses, everything. Because we need more teachers who understand that education is about more than money. How many students are you thinking? 12 per year to start. That's approximately $1.7 million annually. I can sustain that indefinitely with the investment income alone. Gregory made notes. What else? A $5 million donation to Lincoln High for renovations, technology upgrades, and a permanent fund for classroom supplies. Teachers shouldn't have to buy their own pencils and paper. Agreed. Anything else? An after-school tutoring program. Free. Available to any student in the area who needs help. I want to hire retired teachers at $35 per hour, 3 hours per day, 5 days per week. Same thing my grandfather did, but systematized and expanded. Budget? Approximately $820,000 per year. Consider it done. Where will you house the program? I'll rent a space on Riverside Drive near my grandfather's old apartment. We'll call it Harper's Place. Over the next 3 months, Daniel watched his grandfather's dream take shape. Harper's Place opened in December 2024, a renovated storefront with bright lights, new desks, and 15 retired teachers who remembered William Harper and were honored to carry on his work. The first week, 47 students showed up. By the end of the first month, they were serving 134 students. Kids who were failing math started passing. Students who'd never considered college began preparing for the SAT. One girl, a senior named Emma Rodriguez, approached Daniel after school one day in January. "Mr. Harper, I got into Stanford with a full scholarship." Her eyes were shining with tears. "I never thought. My mom works 2 jobs. We can't afford college. But I got in." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "That's incredible, Emma. Congratulations. It's because of Harper's Place. Mrs. Randy helped me with calculus every day for 3 months. Mr. Washington helped me write my college essay. And you. You showed me that teachers can change lives. I want to be a teacher too. Then you should apply for the William Harper Foundation Scholarship. It'll cover everything Stanford Scholarship doesn't. Books, housing, everything. You'll be able to focus on your education without worrying about money." Emma started crying for real then. Her mother, whom Daniel had invited to the meeting, hugged her daughter and whispered thank you over and over. These were the moments that made everything else worthwhile. The divorce proceedings moved forward steadily. Victoria's attorney had tried to challenge the prenuptial trust, but 3 separate law firms had reviewed William Harper's work and confirmed it was ironclad. Victoria would receive her share of the marital assets accumulated during their marriage, which amounted to about $87,000 from joint savings accounts funded by her family's gifts, half the furniture from their old apartment, and her car. That's it. 8 years of marriage, and she walked away with less than $100,000. The criminal trial was scheduled for May 2025. The FBI had built an overwhelming case. Robert Sterling faced charges of conspiracy to commit murder, tax evasion, and wire fraud. Margaret Sterling faced conspiracy charges. Tyler faced conspiracy and accessory charges. Amanda faced lesser charges but was cooperating with prosecutors. And Victoria's case was complicated by her attorney's argument that she hadn't understood the seriousness of her family's plans. But the prosecution had the text messages, the life insurance policy changes, the alibis she'd created. It wasn't looking good for her. Daniel tried not to think about it too much, tried not to imagine Victoria in prison, the woman he'd once loved reduced to a jumpsuit and a cell. But then he'd remember her words. "I don't want to know the details," and his sympathy would evaporate. 6 months after his grandfather's funeral, on a surprisingly warm May afternoon, Daniel sat in his backyard in Laurelhurst, watching the cherry blossoms fall like snow. His phone buzzed. Gregory Anderson. "Daniel, Victoria has requested a meeting. No lawyers, just you and her. She says she has something to give you." "I don't want to see her. I understand, but she's insisting it's important, not about the divorce or the criminal case, something else." Daniel sighed. "Where and when?" "Laurelhurst Park, tomorrow at 2 p.m. It's public, safe. I can have someone there discreetly if you'd like." "No, I'll meet her. I need to close this chapter." Victoria was waiting by the pond when Daniel arrived, sitting on a bench and watching the ducks. She looked different, thinner, older, wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of designer clothes. Her wedding ring was gone. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would. Your lawyer said it was important. It's not about the divorce. That's done. I signed everything. You won." She laughed bitterly, though. "I guess winning is relative when you lose everything else. How is your family?" "Dad's in federal prison awaiting trial. They denied bail because he's a flight risk. Mom's under house arrest. Tyler's hedge fund collapsed. He's working as a financial analyst in Salem, making $87,000 a year. He calls me drunk sometimes, crying about how we lost everything. Amanda's divorce was finalized. Her husband's career is over. And me? I'm facing 15 to 20 years in federal prison. My attorney says the best he can do is negotiate down to 10. And you? I'm a yoga instructor, 23 classes a week at $35 per class. I make about $42,000 a year while I wait for trial. Plus, I'm finishing my certification to be a life coach." She met his eyes. "I'm actually happy, Daniel. For the first time in my life, I'm not competing with anyone or trying to impress anyone. I'm just existing. It's terrifying and liberating." "Even knowing you're going to prison?" "Maybe especially because of that. I'll have a lot of time to think about who I've been and who I want to become." They sat in silence for a moment. A duck landed in the pond with a splash, breaking the stillness. "Why did you want to meet?" Daniel asked. Victoria slid an envelope across the bench. Inside was a check made out to the William Harper Foundation for $15,000. "It's everything I saved in 6 months of teaching yoga," she said. "I wanted it to go to a scholarship in your grandfather's name. He was a better person than anyone in my family, and I never appreciated that until it was too late." Daniel looked at the check, then at Victoria. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She was just trying, in her imperfect way, to do something right. "I'll make sure it goes to a student who needs it," he said, taking the check. "Thank you." She stood to leave, then paused. "Are you seeing anyone dating?" "Not yet. I'm focusing on the foundation, on teaching. Maybe someday you'll find someone wonderful, someone who sees what I was too stupid to see. That you were always enough exactly as you were. There's something else I need to say." Victoria sat back down, her hands trembling. "About the murder plot. I know my attorney is arguing that I didn't understand what was happening, and maybe legally that's true. Maybe I didn't know the specific details. But Daniel, I knew enough. When my mother said, 'remove permanently,' I knew she didn't mean convince you to leave. I knew she didn't mean pay you off. I knew what she meant. And I chose not to ask, because asking would have meant I'd have to do something. I'd have to choose between you and them. And I chose them, even though it might cost you your life. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve the truth. And because I'm going to prison anyway. My attorney thinks he can get me a plea deal if I maintain the ignorance defense, but I don't want to. I want to admit what I did, or what I didn't do, which is worse." "You could have just stayed quiet," Daniel said. "Taken the deal, served less time." "I could have. But your grandfather's will talked about choices, about how financial freedom gives you the power to choose what's right over what's convenient. I don't have financial freedom, but I have something else now. I have the freedom that comes from hitting bottom. There's nothing left to protect, no image to maintain, no family approval to chase. So I can finally choose what's right." Victoria stood again. This time, she didn't look back. "I hope you build something beautiful with your life, Daniel. Something that honors your grandfather and the man you've always been." "I hope you find peace," he said honestly. "Even after everything, I hope you find some kind of peace." She walked away across the park, and Daniel sat alone with the check and the strange feeling that he'd just witnessed someone's redemption begin. It didn't change what she'd done, didn't erase the 8 years of betrayal and the moment she'd chosen not to save his life. But it was something. A first step. Maybe that was all anyone could ask for. 3 weeks later, Victoria Harper pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder, rejecting her attorney's advice and the prosecution's plea deal. She received a sentence of 12 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole after 8. Robert Sterling received 15 years for conspiracy and 7 years for tax evasion, to be served consecutively. Margaret received 10 years. Tyler received 8 years. Amanda, who had cooperated extensively, received 3 years and probation. The investment firm collapsed. The Sterling name, once synonymous with wealth and prestige in Portland, became synonymous with greed and attempted murder. Their story became a cautionary tale, taught in ethics classes and discussed in op-eds about the corrupting influence of unchecked privilege. Daniel tried not to pay attention to the media coverage. He had more important things to focus on. By the fall of 2025, the William Harper Foundation had awarded scholarships to 24 students. Harper's Place was serving 347 students per week. Lincoln High had completed its renovations, transforming the building his grandfather had cleaned for 41 years into a state-of-the-art learning facility. And Daniel had finally started to feel like himself. Not the diminished version the Sterlings had tried to create, but the person his grandfather had always known he could be. One afternoon in October, Gregory Anderson called with an unexpected proposal. "Mr. Harper, there's someone I'd like you to meet. Her name is Rachel Kim. She's a social worker with the state, works with foster kids aging out of the system. She's brilliant, passionate about education equity, and she's looking for partners to help create a program giving former foster youth access to college prep and scholarship resources." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because your grandfather knew her. She was one of his students at Lincoln High 30 years ago. He tutored her for free, helped her get into college, changed her life. When she heard about the foundation, she reached out to me. She has a proposal for a partnership that could help hundreds of kids every year." "What's the budget?" $3 million annually for the first 5 years. Daniel didn't hesitate. Set up the meeting. Gregory laughed. "Your grandfather told me once that you had his heart. He was worried the Sterlings would crush it out of you. But he also said if anyone could survive them and come out stronger, it was you. I didn't survive them. I survived because of him. Everything he taught me, everything he showed me about what actually matters. That's his real inheritance, Mr. Harper, not the $74 million. The values that guided how he lived and how he raised you." The meeting with Rachel Kim happened the following week at Harper's Place. She was a woman in her mid-40s with kind eyes and an energy that reminded Daniel of the best teachers he knew. "Mr. Harper," she said, shaking his hand firmly, "your grandfather was one of the most important people in my life. I was 16, in foster care, failing algebra. He spent 3 hours a week tutoring me for 2 years. Never asked for anything in return. Just believed I could do it when no one else did." "He had that effect on people," Daniel said softly. Rachel spread her proposal across the table. Every year, approximately 20,000 kids age out of the foster system in the United States. Most have no family support, no financial resources, and no clear path to higher education. Only 3% graduate from college. The statistics are heartbreaking. "I want to change them," Rachel said, "at least in Oregon. I want to create a comprehensive program, say T-Prep, college application support, scholarship assistance, and mentoring through the first 4 years of college. Everything these kids need to succeed, but currently don't have access to. How many students could we help? With $3 million per year? Approximately 200 students annually. Full support from junior year of high school through college graduation. The program would be housed here at Harper's Place and at 2 other locations we'd establish in Eugene and Bend. We'd hire counselors, tutors, and mentors, all people who understand the foster system, who've lived it themselves when possible." Daniel looked at the proposal, at the budget breakdowns and success metrics, at the faces of the kids Rachel wanted to help. His grandfather had spent his life believing that everyone deserved a chance, that circumstances of birth shouldn't determine destiny. This program was exactly the kind of thing he would have supported. Let's do it. Just like that? Rachel looked surprised. Don't you want to think about it? Consult with advisors? Run the numbers? I trust the numbers are right because you wouldn't bring me a proposal that wasn't thoroughly researched. I trust the program will work because you have the passion and expertise to make it work. And I trust this is what my grandfather would want because it's exactly the kind of thing he did quietly for his entire life. Let's make it official, public, and big enough to change lives. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. This is going to change everything for these kids. That's the whole point. Over the next year, Daniel watched his grandfather's legacy expand beyond anything he'd originally imagined. The William Harper Foundation grew to include the foster youth program, which they named Second Chances. Harper's Place expanded to 3 locations across Oregon. Lincoln High became a model for what public schools could achieve with proper funding and support. Emma Rodriguez, the girl who'd gotten into Stanford, finished her first year with a 3.9 GPA and declared a major in education. She called Daniel in June to tell him she was coming home for the summer to volunteer at Harper's Place. I want to give back, she said, the way your grandfather gave to me. That's how legacies work. You're part of his now. And Daniel himself changed. Not in dramatic, obvious ways, but in small, important ones. He started dating again, casually. He traveled during summer break, something he'd never been able to afford before. He bought a few nice things not to impress anyone, but because he genuinely enjoyed them. He went to therapy weekly, working through the trauma of betrayal and the complicated grief of losing his grandfather while simultaneously inheriting his fortune. He learned to forgive not Victoria, who was serving her sentence at a federal facility in California, but himself for not seeing the truth sooner. And he learned something his grandfather had tried to teach him all along. That wealth wasn't about money. It was about freedom. Freedom to choose your values. Freedom to help others. Freedom to build a life that mattered. One evening in November 2026, exactly 2 years after his grandfather's funeral, Daniel stood in Harper's Place watching 60 students working with tutors. A girl in the corner was mastering algebra, same as Rachel Kim had 30 years ago. A boy near the window was writing a college essay about overcoming homelessness. 2 students were practicing interview skills for scholarship applications. His phone buzzed with a text from Gregory Anderson. The Second Chances program just got its first acceptance letter. Marcus Webb, one of the first foster youth we enrolled, got into Oregon State with a full ride. He wants to be a social worker like Rachel. Daniel smiled and typed back. My grandfather would be proud. Gregory's response came immediately. He already was. Always was. Daniel looked around Harper's Place, at the building his grandfather's money had rented. Filled with students, his grandfather's vision was helping, taught by teachers his grandfather's values had inspired. This was what $74 million looked like when you understood what wealth actually meant. Not designer handbags or penthouse apartments, not country club memberships or luxury cars, just people helping people, building futures instead of hoarding resources. His grandfather had spent 41 years as a janitor, building a fortune in secret while helping students who couldn't afford tutors. He lived modestly, saved meticulously, and left behind a legacy that would change thousands of lives. Daniel Harper was a high school history teacher earning $61,500 a year who happened to have $74 million in the bank. He drove a 2012 Toyota Camry, lived in a nice but not ostentatious house, and spent his free time running a tutoring program and a scholarship foundation. And for the first time in 8 years, maybe in his whole life, he felt wealthy in the way that actually mattered. Not because of the money, because of what he was building with it. Because of who he was becoming without people telling him he'd never be enough. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming exactly who you were meant to be without apology, without compromise, and without the people who never saw your worth in the first place. Daniel looked at the students filling Harper's Place, their faces intense with concentration. their futures opening up with each equation solved and each concept mastered. "Grandpa," he said quietly to the empty air and to the grandfather who was listening somewhere, "I get it now. I finally get it. The wealth wasn't the point. It never had been. The point was freedom, freedom to choose kindness over status, freedom to invest in people instead of impressing them, freedom to build something that mattered instead of chasing something that sparkled. His grandfather had given him $74 million, but the real inheritance was the lesson that came with it. You're worth more than other people's opinions of you, and the only validation that matters is living according to your own values." Daniel Harper had learned that lesson the hard way, but he'd learned it, and that in the end was worth more than all the money in the world.